all these things that these gurus and fucking teachers tell us. It's like, oh, it's just like, you just do it. No, you don't just do it. This isn't Nike. You
Okay, welcome back to the Authentic as Fuck podcast.
What's up?
My name is Son. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey, what's up?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's jump right into the topic that we didn't cover last time,
Mm-hmm.
which is, do you remember what it was?
No. I barely remember
No?
what day it was. Do you remember?
So I remember like there was one thing that we wanted to talk about, which I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
One of them is because on one of the episodes we started talking about judgment,
Yeah.
and then we kind of stopped. And then maybe we can talk about like the kind of pivot that you guys made in terms of like going from B2C personal branding to like a B2B
Mm-hmm.
personal branding.
Yeah.
Which one you want to
That's
talk about?
judgment. I mean, talking about the business stuff is cool, but we can start with the judgment stuff.
Yeah.
That warms me up a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I remember us specifically talking about, like, I believe that, like, in my experience, I believe that we all judge. Is that what we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how it's just like it's almost like a part of our innate survival is to make judgments. I mean, that is what conditions us to be humans, I believe. Um, and then it's like, what do you do with that once you make the judgment? How do you use that information um, externally in the world? So, anything you would add to that?
Can you give an example? Like,
Yeah, like let's say someone, I mean, use like some kind of, I'll use parenting. Like we talked a little bit about parenting, like how people are parenting. Um, yeah, there's constantly like judgment happening, I think. Whether you don't have kids and you're making those judgments, whether you do have kids and you have a different style of parenting. Um,
mm-hmm.
for me, I'm either taking that information in and I have some questions about the individual that I see doing actions that I may not take, or I'm taking that information in and thinking, oh, that might be useful to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost just like constant, maybe it isn't judgment as much as it is like constant interaction or information gathering
Mm-hmm.
in order
I
to,
mean, but are there certain parenting methods that you look at and you're like, oh, that, like, oh, look at that mom doing that,
I
like
mean,
judging other
anything
moms.
that's, yeah, you know what? But I have like a sensitivity to this, like, sometimes, so obviously things for me like spanking, which you don't really see a lot of that in public
Yeah,
anymore, or any kind of
no,
aggressive behavior towards
you
children,
never
or at
did,
least I don't.
even back then.
Yeah. That's a parenting style that I don't think works for me and my kids and my
Mhm.
family. But even things like this is one that I'm very
But do you
sensitive
judge
to.
other people when they do it to their family?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
And if you say that you don't, then it's
yeah.
hard for me to believe you, but there is a judgment that happens for me. Mm,
Mm-mm.
like why are we doing that? Like what in your brain makes you think that that's going to generate a successful outcome? I mean, it
Yeah,
does, I guess, to some degree. I mean, but long term, in the long game, that just doesn't make sense to me. Um, but things just as small as, and this is what I'm so sensitive to. Like let's say you're at the park or you're somewhere with your kid, and the parents that say, Um, and it is an effective tactic, but the parents to say, okay, well, I'm leaving. Bye. You know, if your kid won't leave,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to leave you here. These threats of I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
leave you break my heart. Like, because
Really?
it's,
Why?
yeah, man, because like a child, like you
My
are
parents
all
used to
that
do that to me.
I know my parents did it to me. My parents did it to me. But there is a sense like you're really stepping on, like you're really triggering something emotional for that kid. Like that is in my head almost as equal as
Yeah.
doing something like hitting or spanking because you know, but that's an emotional thing. Like you're
Uh,
over time, you are like conditioning, I'm going to abandon you if you don't do what I say.
hmm
I'm going to leave you if you don't do what I say. And I just don't want to.
Yeah, I know how traumatic it is. Like, one of the things that my parents used to do is when I do something bad, they'll tell me that like we found you under the bridge, and we're gonna bring you back to your real parents.
Oh my god.
and they
That
then
sounds
and they said
funny
I would
now,
start
right?
crying.
But
And they said I will start crying. And we
yeah.
would like joke about that, right? So like, and it is funny, like if you think about it, right? It is kind of funny,
But because
but
the adult you
I was
knows that
crying,
like
so I was obviously it wasn't
yeah.
funny to me at that time.
No. No, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like that is a traumatic emotional trauma thinking that the people that is I mean if you really think about the perspective of your like your child or when you were a kid, like the people that cared for you, whether it was your mom, dad, I don't care, whatever your caregivers, whoever they were, you rely solely on them for your
Yeah.
survival. And
Mhm.
they threaten to take away. I mean, this is very like, I mean, hippy dippy kind of stuff, I guess, very emotional, like thinking
Yeah.
about. But if someone threatens to take away your livelihood, you know, we talked about jobs and external things that we rely on as
hmm
humans.
That's another thing,
That
like job security. Like it's so hard for people to work if they feel like they're gonna get fired at any moment.
correct, right? So then, yes, exactly. Like, how can you focus on anything else if that's your only way of survival? And you're
Yeah.
constantly scared. Relationships, like if you're constantly scared, particularly for a
That
spouse
they're gonna
that,
dump you or something. Yeah.
yeah, like a spouse that isn't the breadwinner.
hmm
Um, if
Yeah,
and you
that's
don't
true
have
too. Yeah.
right, like and you don't have a healthy relationship, and but that's being in this
Well,
relationship is your only way of
but that
survival.
legally, that's, but that's why I think marriage. I actually kind of do think I used to be kind of against marriage. Like, what's this like legal
Mm-hmm.
contract that we have to sign, like that says that we're married, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I get it now, actually, because like when there's a binding contract, it's a different. Even when you work with somebody, like when you with work with somebody on a project or something, versus when there's a contract there, there's something a little bit different happens. Like the commitment is just more there, and then
Yeah.
you know that there's a binding contract. So I actually think that's because like if I'm not the breadwinner and I get married, right? There's some sort of a unwritten contract between us that says like, okay, I'm gonna take care of the household and blah blah blah, and you're gonna take care of like the finances, and we're a team, right? There's some sort of a unwritten
Mm-hmm.
contract there, right? Except if you don't get married legally, that's all that. It's just the unwritten contract that you assume. It's not
Right.
real yet. But then once you are married, that legally binds it, so that like if you ever do leave, I get my half or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think that's. I used to be so against that, but now I'm kind of like, oh, it actually makes sense because you know.
No, you know what? I agree because like Michael and I have a prenup, right?
Oh,
And
really?
we
Okay.
didn't yeah, we didn't go into it thinking, "Oh, we need to get this prenup because our relationship isn't going to last."
Mm-mm-mm.
But we don't have any crystal balls. We can't tell the future. And I think Michael put it really well one time when he was explaining it, saying like without that, like we both have clarity and we both have agreed to what would happen to us financially, um if heaven forbid something happened to our relationship. And so what that does is it like takes out that confusion or fear or uncertainty that I feel like if the relationship started to veer off track, that actually
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
having any clarity there actually muddies the waters a little bit and
Hmm.
forces people to act differently. Um, so at the end of the day, like we know, I know what would happen to me and he knows what would happen to him. And it just like you said, it just kind of, because there's a binding contract, it like makes things a lot clearer and there's just like a lot more certainty.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, that's why
but
contracts, like, I think, really exist. It- It's like insurance, right?
yeah,
So,
clear
like, by the time
expectations.
you go to, I think by the time you go to court, I think it's already kind of too late, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But you don't even want to let it get there. But the
Right.
contract is, I guess, kind of an insurance.
Yeah, hopefully it's there, I think, to like you said, insurance, or it's like to prevent you to having to go to court. Like if you're
Hmm.
having to go to court to dispute a contract, like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
probably too far gone. But
yeah, yeah. But prenup is one of those things where it, it's kind of like when you ask somebody to do it, it's it raises that question, what, you don't trust me, like, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's also that, right? That
Yeah.
some people might be like, oh, if you were really in love, you wouldn't have a prenup, you know, something like that.
I know I definitely had, because Michael obviously asked me. I wasn't thinking about it really. I
Mhm.
should have been. No matter if you have like $100 billion or $10 in your bank account, I feel like a prenup is necessary today. Like just so there's just clarity. Um
Mhm.
or there's a benefit to it. I'll just say that cuz you never
Mhm.
know what's going to happen. So when he initially asked me though, I was like, "Really? Like
Mhm.
do you think we're going to get divorced? Do you think this, like, why are we even getting married? You know, like you're already thinking about that." Um and then soon I was able to kind of reframe it where it was like, well, this is actually not just protection for him, but there's also protection for me. And we both
Mhm.
have to agree to this. It's not just a one-sided thing. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had my
yeah.
own lawyer, he had his own lawyer. She was fighting for things for me from my perspective. His lawyer's like trying to protect his stuff. So we were able to get to like a mutual um
Most of the times that doesn't
contract.
really make sense though, because I feel like most uh like, I feel like that really only makes sense like if one person's making significantly a amount of money, because because like then I can understand, like, if you're making the same amount of money, they're not going to raise a question and be like, what, you don't trust me, or like, you know what I mean, or
Yeah.
that, like, because it's obviously like the amount difference is not that much, but usually when that happens, it's like when like some athlete or some celebrity gets married, from the guy's perspective, or the whoever is like making the money, from their
Mhm.
perspective, it's almost like I need to I need a test to make sure that this person's marrying for me and not for my money, right? Something like that.
Yeah. I
Like,
think that is
because like
like
there's
the
been,
typical
yeah,
situation.
there's been cases where some basketball player was getting married, and she wouldn't, like, he said that I'm not getting married until you sign a prenup, but she wouldn't sign it. I'll do it till the end. And literally on the day of the wedding, he canceled the wedding because she didn't sign it.
Good for him. I would have too.
Yeah.
But also, but I do think there is value in kind of just predetermining that stuff, even if you both aren't like,
Mhm.
millionaire, billionaires, or one of you isn't, because then you like avoid all the fighting, right? Like, even if it is,
Mhm.
we're just going to get really clear. Anything
Yeah.
that was mine, my retirement fund, my whatever I've had before you came along, that is mine. And that I don't have to half that with you if we get divorced. Like, I think there's
Mhm.
even more to think about than just like your cash on hand. Like, any assets, do you own anything? Like, uh,
It's
just
usually like it's usually for the money that you made during the time you were married. I think that's what gets split.
okay. So it's not everything you had
I
before.
mean, that's what I thought. Yeah. I mean, legally,
Um, and I guess it
if you
varies state to
curious.
state.
Yeah.
I think there are like
Mhm.
different laws in each state, but I don't know. I
Which
think I
kind of
would
makes
just
sense
want the
because
clarity.
what a lot of people don't know is that a lot of those billionaires um, that have families and stuff, like most of the time, like that person would not have done what he could have done without that spouse. Like
Exactly.
that's something a lot of people don't see because we don't put a lot of value into like family. Like we don't put a
Yeah.
lot of value into like raising kids and people taking care of the household, right? But
Yeah.
that's to have that side is so important for that billionaire to go out and make the money because it's all a balance, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, almost everybody that I know, I don't know if you feel that way, but myself included, uh, made more money after we got married. After, and it's
Mhm.
not just making more money; it's just making more money and save more money, and just in general, like your life is just a lot better when you're married, right? And that's because when you have a partner,
Mhm.
um, it's it's easier for me to take risks when I have a partner. If
Yeah.
they say the U.S. military never sends anyone on a task alone, right? They always send in pairs at minimum, and like Mormons when they go out, always go in pairs,
Mm.
and that's because they did a study, and it turns out that when you're getting attacked, and when there's only one of you, you're gonna most likely hide and eventually get killed. But when there's
Mm.
two of you, the chances are you're gonna fight. And that's because when there's two of you, people are more likely to take risks. Whereas
Yeah.
in you're by yourself, you're less likely to take risks.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, from my experience, like, having the partner is a
Yeah, you're in it
huge
together.
compliment. Yeah, you're in it together, and it does,
Ride
like,
or
there is
die.
like this ride or die, baby. Like, but even like Michael in the last chapter of his book, he writes about um his ex-wife and how he lost $1 million when he was like selling his company because I mean, she was there along the way. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe she didn't do a lot to contribute. They didn't have children or anything, but he did say like she was there for that. She was there when she was my partner in all of that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
along the
It's not
way.
nothing. It's I know it
Yeah,
seems like most people will look at that as like, what does she do? But it's not. It's really not nothing. Because I
no.
see it for myself. Like,
Right. And just like
because
how
all
much
of
he
those
leaned.
things are the things that Michael would have had to worry about if she wasn't there, right? Like
Right.
just all the household stuff. And also, when your
Yeah.
home is a mess, most likely your business is going to be a mess
A
too.
bit.
You know what I mean? Like,
That's true. That's
it's
true.
like a mindset. Yeah.
Yeah. And like even now, like I think about while I'm not in the day to day of the business like I used
Mhm.
to be, um, he and I still, that is a topic of conversation. We are
Yeah,
still
because it
talking
affects
through
both of you.
strategic. It affects both of us. Like his decisions affect both of
That's
us.
what I mean by it bonds you two. Like, there's
Yeah.
no getting away from it, right? Like, you have to
No.
make it work because otherwise, you're literally on the same boat.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Like it is a team. Any entrepreneur, like you are in it. with that teammate. You're not in
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
alone, I don't think.
Yeah.
But
That's why I think having a business partner is also good if you're single. Like
yeah.
just to have somebody to go through it with. But when you're married, it's like I know like a lot of single people don't see this, but like getting married is probably the best thing I've done in my life because
Mhm.
like it literally changed my life because like you know I I never had things in order at home before I was married, right? I always felt like I'm living like a bachelor coming home to this like messy apartment where everything's out of order, chaos, right? And and I wasn't kidding about that. Like how you like how you manage your home is how you manage your life, right? And
Mhm.
I can tell a lot about a person, like how successful they are, by looking at their bedroom, like whether they make their bed or not, or like little things like that, like how you organize your own life. It
Mhm.
really likes. I mean, like I do believe that how you do one thing is how you do everything. That's like because I
Yeah.
know there are people that, well, I guess a lot of people are like that. When I give tasks to, most people see tasks as black and white, either done or not done. But to me, I don't see. To me, a task can be from 0 to 100 and everything in between. Like you can do it completely half-assed, or you can do it the best in the world possible, right? And everything in between.
I could not agree with you more. Like I'd almost rather you not do it if you're
Yeah,
if you're gonna
yeah.
like just don't fucking do it. Just don't because it's not just done or not done.
I
And
know
but I
what you
think
mean,
like just don't
but
fucking
we need
do it.
those
I'd
people
rather
too,
do it.
don't you think?
No, oh
Because sometimes
yes.
we just need to get it done half-ass.
Sometimes
And you put me there, it's not gonna get done.
yeah, because it's like I can't do it half ass. I can't do it
Yeah,
half
yeah, yeah,
ass. And
yeah.
so now I'm just stuck. Because for me, sometimes, like, if I don't think I can do it 100%, then I almost don't do it at all. I don't know if that, like, I don't,
That's me. Yeah,
like, it's like, well, I don't want to do that because I can't do it the way that I'm
yeah,
wired to do things.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I, there's someone that we work with and that's on our team, and she is really good at man
Just getting it done.
she is man you give her it would I may have said this before, but she's definitely one of those people that's wired that she would rather do like 200 tasks every day that are the exact same versus three brand new problems every day. Does that make
Because
sense? Like
that
she
feels good.
really
Like
oh yeah,
checking
the
up, done,
dopamine, and she's
done.
talked about
Yeah.
that. She's like the
But
dopamine
for
man,
us,
like
that actually feels bad because I feel like I'm just going through the motion, right? I rather really focus my energy and just focus on one project
yeah.
and make that a masterpiece. you know?
Yeah, yeah, and, like, have this really cool problem to solve, like
Yeah.
and if by day 5 of doing those same 200 tasks, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Fuck that, I'm only gonna do, like, 50 today because this is so
Yeah.
boring. I can't do
I
this."
mean, but
But she
thank God for those people. Like,
and I have told her over and over, "I am so grateful that you are just, like, able to do that," and that's why it takes a team. I mean, we're talking about teams. It does take these
hmm
different, skill sets to actually move the ball forward and to make change. But she and I've talked numerous times because there'll be something that like I'm like, how did you even do that? Or how did we get here? And she's
it's
like, well, I was just
really
trying to get
good
it
to
done.
work with somebody like that. I think
Oh yeah.
because
It's so
it's really
good.
good to work with someone opposite of you
Hmm.
because it makes you really self-aware and it makes you see how how different people are and
Oh,
you know what I mean. It actually makes you
sh-
judge less, I think, for that
I,
reason because
and you start
you
to
know what I mean.
appreciate more, right? Like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I think I was very judgmental of the way that she operated at first. And
Yeah, because
now
you're looking at it from how you think. But now you
Yes.
realize that she actually thinks totally different than you. It's,
Completely. Now, and one of two things can happen. Either that creates
yeah,
like a huge disconnect because you can't get over the judgment of how the other person works. And so
that's
the
true.
wedge just gets bigger and bigger. And I've had that happen. There are people I don't talk to this
So
day
what's the
because I can't.
difference?
You have to
Like,
be,
how does
how
you
do you,
go down one way versus the other when
I've
you're in
had
that
this happen.
situation with the opposite
There,
personality?
there is one person I will not talk to for the rest of my life because we had such a poor working relationship. She is the exact same style in many ways as another
So what's
person that I
different?
work with. So I had to, man, I had to get real humble. I had to like say, ego, you're not fucking better than the way that she works. Cause that's what was happening in my brain. I was like, I am so much better. Whether I want to admit that and it like kind of
Yeah,
stings to have to admit that is like I was so judgmental and I have to work so hard. I mean, when I say work hard, I mean put in work. I make a conscious effort to talk to her at least an hour and a half every week and to adjust to her style as much as possible. Right? And we accommodate each
but
other
it's
and we talk
probably
about it.
because. But I bet you it's because you realized on your own, even before talking to her, you probably realized on your own how some of those things are. Like for, I'll give you an example from my perspective, right? So how you and her are opposites, that's how me
Mhm.
and Gigi are total opposites. Like I actually think that Gigi is the exact uh, mirror of me. Like I don't even know how I was able to find somebody like exactly perfect like mirror of me because everything that I am, she's the exact opposite of. So
Mhm.
I'm a super introvert. She's a super extrovert. Like I love like analytical stuff. She loves people, and I'm terrible at remembering names and faces. I can never remember names and faces. She remembers every name and face. Like so, what I started noticing is so a lot of people at first look when they see us like and a lot of people ask me like son how do you like I can't I don't know how you guys have a relationship like what do you guys talk about like it seems like you guys would have nothing in common and like how can you have like a relationship with somebody like that and I think in the beginning I was like that in the beginning it's like oh, I can't have conversations with her blah blah blah, blah. But then what I realized over time is there are certain characters that she has that I could never do and I started to see how that helps. That's helping. I started to see over the years that ever since I
Mhm.
got married, my life has gotten better. And I chase back, and I'm like, why? Like, what exactly is happening here that's
Mhm.
making my life better? And it was because she was balancing me out. So I started to
Yeah.
see in the beginning, I was like, no, you do it this way or you suck, or you have to be like this or you suck, right? Like my way is the best way. But then after she kind of balanced me out after years, I look back and I'm like, oh shit, like maybe my way wasn't the best way, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
maybe I became maybe I became more successful because of this balance. Like an example is this, right? I'm so emotional and I have so much conviction on certain things that when I
Mhm.
get into like conflicts with people, like I really get into conflicts, right? And a lot of times, like I'm wrong and I feel like shit, right? So something like that happened in the beginning of the years of Night Owl with one of our employees, and then I felt bad, and then at the end, like we kind of we made up and everything. Uh, but the way it happened was Gigi triggered it, right? Gigi called him back, and then as soon as he came in, the first thing she did was she walked up to him and she gave him a hug, and it's like you know, and I that's exactly what I should have done but I didn't have the personality to do it.
Mhm.
Do you understand what I mean? So I'm
Yeah.
so fucking glad she did it. because you know what I mean.
Yeah,
And
but
things
you know,
like that have, yeah,
oh,
so many
oh,
things like that have happened. Like I'm so bad at I spend every money that I make. She's so good at saving money. Like it's just she's the exact opposite of everything I am. So
yeah, but you know what? I don't think that just would happen. Uh, like I don't think that just happens, right? Or if it does, that's like a unicorn experience. I think it takes like two individuals working towards a working to, or like appreciating it like you did. Like you're able to step back and appreciate that.
yeah, but it took a long
Um
time though. It took years.
but I do, yeah, of course, but like your ability to be healthy and not just give up and like drive that way. There's some reason why you were able to stay together for the years before that, because otherwise when you're so,
Yeah,
I believe
yeah,
when you're in such opposition, years is not, unless one
yeah.
is super super passive, like years
We
is not going to
either
allow that to happen.
exactly. I think in that kind of situation, there's a threshold, and most likely you're
Yes,
gonna probably break up before that threshold. But when you can make
exactly.
it past that threshold, and you start to appreciate that person, I think a whole new thing happens.
I would I would bet, and
Like
probably if you
right
thought
now,
back,
I'm way more afraid of losing Gigi than
yeah,
like Gigi is probably losing me, even though she
right,
probably thinks
yeah.
otherwise.
I bet she thinks
Just because I
otherwise.
know how much because I know how much that personality and that thing is needed in my life, which I don't
Mhm.
have.
Yeah. No, and that's beautiful, right? And I bet if you looked back on your relationship sometime early on after the first little initial dating where everything's good, there was some kind of disagreement or argument or tension in your relationship that you guys handled in a way that actually brought you closer and was like that first
Mhm.
glimmer of appreciation for the opposing partner. Um,
Yeah, you
because
really
I
need to work
know
on it though.
you have to work
Like,
on it, but I know
yeah,
in the relationships that I have that aren't romantic, just working relationships that I have had that have come to a demise, it's that we weren't intentional and working in that first initial conflict, that big one, not the little ones, that first
the
big
first time
initial
it
one where
happens,
the
yeah.
first time after, oh, we're over the honeymoon phase of working together. There's some
Uh,
initial conflict that either you work through or you don't. And I remember it with the this other person that I have a really good relationship with. I remember when we had that conflict where I'm mad, she's hurt, but we worked through it and we pushed through that like uncomfortable situation. And not just push through it like grin and bear it, like really worked through the uncomfortable piece to see each other's sides. And maybe it didn't happen immediately, but I know that we walked away from that conversation appreciating each other and the quirks that each other has or the differences that each other's have. Um, and I do think that there are
you
these
sure she?
moments.
You sure she felt the same way about you
Yeah.
that way? That's,
Like probably not to the same degree because just
uh,
because the personality, like the way the personalities are,
uh,
kind of like what you're saying about Gigi.
yeah.
But I do think that there was a clarity, there was an understanding maybe of why I did things a certain way where it may have not been clear before, and so she's just able to appreciate it. Maybe not
Hmm.
understand why I work that way, maybe not understand why I make decisions the way I do or say things the way I do, but there's an appreciation or just like a like,
And that
"Oh,
means she
okay."
also she had to let go. It means she doesn't have a lot of ego also.
Mhm.
Because
And
if
she
somebody
doesn't.
has
She's
a
le
lot of ego, it wouldn't work. Yeah.
no. Or and
and
even if you have a
and
lot of
Gigi's like
ego,
that.
because
Gigi has no ego. Gigi has zero ego. That's the beauty of it. And I have a
right, and then
lot
these
of
people are
ego.
I know, I was gonna say I probably have a lot of ego, but even when you do, son, like even us, I know that you and I both are able to set that aside for a second. I think we can see
Yeah,
our
yeah, yeah. So that's
egos.
why we had to see that in order
Mhm.
for us to accept it and start working with this person, right? But before we
Yes.
see it, before the self-aware part, I think we start going like, no, that's the wrong way. Like, why can't she just do it like this? Like,
Exactly.
why can't you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But yeah,
Like
so
the
I totally, I'm so
self-awareness.
glad I saw that. I'm so glad I saw that
Oh, me
because it's
too.
the thing that everybody else dismisses, right? Like
Yeah.
at night owl, people don't realize how, because I've been seeing it for years, I know. But people don't realize that if like Gigi was missing for like a week, like the office would be a mess, and like we wouldn't have our water, we wouldn't have our lunch, like like you know what I mean? Like a lot of
Yeah.
people don't see those things, so I'm glad I saw it because a lot of
Right.
people would
Because,
dismiss that, right? Like, psh, like who cares? Like
or they don't
anybody
even
could order
think about
lunch.
it.
yeah,
They don't even think about it because it just happens. I mean, for
yeah,
me, like
yeah.
that role that was really modeled for me was my mom. Like, I now have an appreciation for all the shit she did around our house. Somehow my
Mhm.
laundry always ended up clean. Somehow
Yeah.
the kitchen floors were always clean. The house was always clean. I always had my lunch packed. I always had breakfast. Like these things that you don't miss them until maybe you don't have them
Until you
for a
have to do
bit,
it
or
yourself.
like until you have to do it yourself. And I bet like the reason I think the reason they get dismissed is because you don't actually know that they're happening. These people are such
hmm
magicians. These people are such like, these people are so good at their job that you don't even know
That's
they're
the
doing
beauty.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
And
you don't even know that they're doing it.
it's also like um how much they because people are always like, oh, why can't we can just hire somebody to do that, right? We can just hire somebody to order lunch, we can just hire somebody to do the birthday, do the admin stuff. But what they don't understand is, yes, we can, but the way that that person is going to do those things, then the way that Gigi is going to do it is totally different because Gigi actually cares. You know what I
And it
mean?
goes back to what we were saying. It's not just a task, right? It's not because yes,
Yeah.
anybody can order lunch. It's how
uh,
like why for you and I think, and probably a lot of other people, is that there is a spectrum of how things get done. There's like an art to
yeah.
that role. That is such an underappreciated role for most um companies, I think.
Well,
And
that's why I think
I was gonna say
either way.
either you really take care of that role, like you invest in that role, you find the right person for that role, and you're gonna have a much different experience than if you just hire someone to do it, right? Like
Mm,
your company is going
yeah.
to have a very different experience.
Yeah. It's kind of
So,
like executive assistants. Like I remember
yeah.
when I worked at Cablevision, the executive assistants there like made way much more money than the some of the executives, and they like the CEO's assistant was with him for I think 15 years or something like that, right? So
Dude, it's
it,
an
yeah,
artwork. I was in a one of my first jobs, actually my very first job out of college was, and even in college, was an administrative assistant. And then I grew to
mm,
like an executive assistant, which is a
mm,
totally different playing ground. Um there is like, I'm so glad I had that job so that
mm,
like when I was like an executive on the other side of
mm,
it, I could like appreciate how fucking hard that job is because it is an
yeah,
art. It
yeah.
is an
But they know
art.
that, they know that because those people
Some of
cannot
them do.
operate without.
It just depends on how they look at it, right? Like I was very fortunate that I worked with someone who appreciated that this is an art, to make sure that, I mean, thinking down to,
Most people at that level knows.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Or, but there's some shitty people, man, who just look at it as like a job and that anyone can do it. Or maybe it's just like they don't hire the right people.
Well, those are because that means they're not very experienced. Because anyone who's been
Yeah.
working it for a while understand the importance of that role, right?
And yeah,
So I'm
yeah, I
thinking of the
think you're right.
executives. Yeah, yeah,
Because it's like they would die without that person. That's why they
yeah.
keep them
It's a
around
little bit
for.
different than a sales manager that's managing 20 people. Like the
Hmm.
like that boss might not understand. individuals, like why they're so important. But like an executive and an executive assistant, that relationship, that's like a holy relationship. It's
That is a holy relation.
like that person cannot function without the executive assistant, and they know that.
They yes, good one. Yes. And it's like a marriage, right? Like I think
Yeah, yeah.
there is like that relationship, this balance,
Mhm.
um this beautiful thing that can happen when you find the right fit. Um
Yeah, yeah.
and then you never want them to leave. I remember I worked with a physician who, I mean, he had been at the hospital forever, and his executive assistant, he was like, "You can't retire." I mean, they had been together like 25 years or something. He was like, "You can't retire yet. Like, can we just make it another year?" Like he was like, "I can't. We just got to." They were going to retire around the same time, and he was just like, "You can't." I remember her like laughing because he was like, "I will bribe you to just stay another year." Um, but it is a very valuable role. It's like you can almost
Mhm.
think for each other. Or you don't even have to talk. You know what I mean? Like you just kind of know, just like in a marriage.
There's so many roles like that where most people don't really appreciate the role. Like they don't really get the credit, but
Hmm.
they're the ones that you know what? I actually think that the way the world runs, I think the people that are really doing all the important stuff just don't get the credit. and
Yeah,
and it's almost like they're okay with it. You know what I mean?
because they
Like,
don't want. I think people in those roles don't want that spotlight. There's
yeah,
comfort in I'm the
yeah,
supporting. I'm
yeah.
the supporting actor back here. Or I'm the supporting role, and this is my happy place. This is where I get my cup filled. This is my love
Hmm.
language, right? Um, and as long as they are also recognized for everything that they're doing, they can stay in that, that we're feeding, they're getting fed what they need. They actually love helping people. They find fulfillment in
Yeah,
helping people. And um like it's a trait that I don't have. Like I will like I
yeah.
just don't get fulfilled the same way that
But it's something that
someone in that role
you
does.
didn't used to appreciate, but now you
I
do.
didn't. Now I do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I think too, when I was in that executive assistant role, that helped me appreciate a little bit, but also like I was just doing that as like a stepping stone to do something else. So I don't think I like
Yeah.
fully appreciated it until now. I mean, it's taken me this long. And I'm kind of
Mhm.
pissed I didn't recognize it sooner. But
But
um
that's why that whole, I mean, you probably didn't even put the two to two together until like way later. Like
yeah.
that, oh, I'm almost doing the same thing that I wouldn't want my old boss to do to me, or something like that, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, like wow. Or I think I started to realize is what happened for me is that there was like a demise of every relationship that I would have with this particular personality. Like, and not just a
mm-mm-mm.
gentle demise, like, okay, season's over, we're moving on, like a full blown, I never want to see your
Why?
face again.
Maybe there was like one case before in your history where it really burned you.
Maybe. I don't know. I think I was just like, couldn't see my side of the street.
Because like for the longest time, I hated people that are lazy,
Or, yeah.
and now I don't hate them as much anymore. But it's
Still hate them a
you know,
little, but not
yeah, I
as
still hate
much.
them. But like going back to like the whole judgment thing, right? Like it's so tied with self awareness because
Hmm.
the reason why we judge, because that same personality, right? That's different than us. The difference between judging that versus appreciating it is literally like it's like one thin line away.
Oh,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? because you
Absolutely.
can look
Yep.
at it like, oh, that person is not doing it like me, therefore it's wrong, right? Or we can be like,
Mhm.
oh wow, that person is not doing it like me. How great! Like, well, I,
R
I appreciate it, right? So
right, what can
you
I
can look
learn
at
from
the
this?
same
Like,
thing, yeah.
yeah. Dude, you're right,
And
it
that's
is
why
a
I think
fine.
we judge.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's if the ego, I don't know, I think even for me, I still make that judgment, and then I have to make a conscious effort to appreciate it or to just, like, see it from that different perspective. It is not innate for me to, like, dismiss the judgment of part of my brain,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
because
But it
so
gets
natural,
easier,
so
right, over time.
it
It's
does,
like
yeah.
ego.
So it's
Yeah.
like muscle memory,
Mm.
but I think the first step for me was just, like, seeing it happen. Like, like, having this perception of,
Yeah,
like,
just being
"Oh, this
aware.
is what's
Yeah.
happening." Yeah, and then once you're aware, man, you unlock so much power of anything you're trying to
Mm.
do better, is, like, the awareness of, like,
Because
"I'm
once you're
doing
aware,
this."
now you have a decision to make. Okay, I'm
Yes.
aware now. I can fix it. I can just not do
Be
anything
like,
about it.
yeah,
And then if you don't
exactly.
do anything about it, it's gonna start killing you. You're gonna be like, okay, I know that I'm doing this wrong, but
It
I'm not doing anything about it.
yes. And I think that was something that I underappreciated, like, and Michael taught me that is just how he's, because I think in some ways I judged myself if I wasn't able to always 100%. And once I became aware
Mhm,
of something I was doing that I wanted to change,
mhm,
if I wasn't able to, flip that switch and change it in every scenario in which it happened. But I learned from him, like, just that power of, like, the awareness that happened, like, the awareness to the judgment, the awareness that I'm saying, "Oh, she's a bad person because she's doing it this way. She's gonna fail because she's didn't do it the way I did it." Um, you're right, over time, just knowing it allowed me to make that decision. But it is not, for me, it is not something that happens overnight where I'm like, "Okay, I'm
mhm.
aware of it and I'm, like, making a
Yeah,
conscious
yeah,
change every time."
yeah.
Um, and I think that, like, all these self-help people, all these gurus or whoever the fuck they are, they really make this sound like it's just gonna, you do it one time and it just happens. And we've been so intentional with Michael's work to be like, no, like, you're practicing this your entire life.
Mhm,
Um, I remember, like, when Michael told me, I'll compare it to recovery. I remember we were, like, on our third date, and Michael was like, "Yeah, so, I still go to meetings." And my naive mind, like, 12-step meetings. My naive mind was like, "What? You haven't fixed that shit? Like, you're still, it's been how many years? It's been like 11 years and you're still going to those meetings?" And he was like, "Yeah." I literally was like, I remember sitting at the table, I was like, "Are you serious? Like, how bad is it? How bad is this addiction, man?" It's 11 years. Because I just didn't understand that there wasn't like oh, I
Yeah.
finished the steps, I move on. It was like such ignorance around recovery in general. And he said, "No, I'm going to have to do meetings for the rest of my life." And I'm like, wow. I think I would said, like, "It must be bad. This must be bad." And he's like, "No, that's what all addicts do. Is like we do this for
Mhm,
the rest of our life." Um, and I think that's like an element of that ignorance is like an element of, like, self-growth and, like, uh all these things that these gurus and fucking teachers tell us. It's like, "Oh, you just, like, do it." Even like Atomic Habits, like
mhm,
all the stuff, like, whatever's like cool right now, it's just like you just do it. No. No, you don't just do it. This isn't Nike. You
yeah,
you literally have to work on this all of the
yeah.
time, and you're going to mess up, and that's okay. And there's going to be seasons of your life where you don't do it at all for whatever reason. Like, so I don't know. I get really, like, pumped up about when these self-help people are just like, just be self-aware, just make a different choice.
I mean, I think they all know that it's not immediate, but the way they can sell it I mean, it's one thing.
Yeah.
Marketing is another thing then, because it's hard to market something that says you're gonna have to do this for the rest of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Who wants to do that?
okay, yeah. It's like I'm out. But yeah, what I'm starting
I
to
just need this
realize
to
is
work in a
that,
week.
like, just like ego and kind of what we talked about, of like, you know, when your ego creeps up at that moment, you just have to be aware, and just by being aware, you can slowly start to control it. And this whole judgment thing, right? What I'm starting to see is like ego, fear, judgment, all of those things. I guess fear and judgment comes out of ego, but I think that's so human nature. It's so nature to us. I don't think we can change it, and it kind of makes sense too, right? Like we know biologically why we have fear, so it's a survival mechanism, right? So we can
Mm-hmm.
survive from that, you know, from the
Mm-hmm.
lion and stuff like that. And it's probably the same thing with judgment, right? Like in order for us to live, we need to be able to judge. Like, is this fruit better than this? Which one's better and which one's worse? So I know that if I eat this, I'm not gonna get sick, right? Like,
Right.
in order for us to live and survive, we have to be able to judge what's better versus worse. But I think in the modern days, most of those things don't apply anymore. But our monkey brain is still has the ego and has all of those things, right? So we just need to kind of constantly check ourselves, like our monkey brains just from creeping up and having that immediate, like, I don't know if you ever heard of this book called Thinking Fast and Slow.
No.
So so it talks about like there's two systems in our brain, right? We have like our when something happens, our immediate reaction trigger, and then we have
Mm-hmm.
the logical side of the brain, which is like, and one is like happens immediately, and the other one usually takes some time, right? So, and there's like a biological reason why we have both. So I think being self-aware is not really like it's fixed, but the practice of, you know, how can we quickly get from the immediate trigger to the long-term thinking brain as fast as
Mm-hmm.
possible.
Yep.
That's that practice, and that gets shorter and shorter and shorter the more you do it.
Yep.
But it's always
That's
gonna be
exactly
there. Like you're always gonna have that monkey
always.
brain. It's because we are. It's in our genes. It's in our DNA.
And it is like you say, it's a way to survive. Sometimes you need that, right? I need that
Yeah,
brain sometimes.
yeah,
Because I don't have time for the slow brain. Like sometimes I need that. But um, man, what you said is like I could not have said it better like that. You just have to train yourself to like tune in and know when that's how to know when the fast brain, the monkey brain is
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Is this a reaction thought? Is this still make sense? And sometimes they do make sense. I think it's always remembering too, like you're not always going to be like in
Mhm.
opposition,
The
but
first time you're aware of it is the most important because
yeah,
obviously, like there, like most of my life, I wasn't ever even aware of that. I was just thinking that, like, oh no, this is the best way, and that's it, right?
yeah,
And then there was that first time where, like, oh, maybe I'm wrong, right?
hmm,
But I think that first time is the key because I believe that most people don't never even get to that first time. But
right,
once you get to the first time and you're aware of it, then it gets a lot easier because now, and I think the way you get to the first time, for me, how it happened was I just had to get beaten, right? Like, because when you run a business, running nothing humbles you faster than running a business. If you think you're the shit and you need to get a little humbled, go start a business because that will
yeah,
humble you, right?
yep, yep,
So that's what happened to me. But one time, a friend of mine asked me a question, which kind of like opened up my mind, which is because he knows how stubborn I am. He's like, and once he knows that I made up my mind, right? So he's like, but the way he asked was instead of saying, it's like, son, don't you think it should be like this instead of doing that? He said, is there any possible way that it can be like this? And that immediately shifted my mind because I
Mhm.
wasn't even thinking that way. But because he asked in a way where is it even possible? It immediately my mind immediately went, wait, is it possible? Even though all the way up
Wait,
until
wait,
that point,
wait.
I wasn't even thinking about
Yeah.
it because he asked it in a genuine way. So
Right.
maybe that
And I think
there's
once
something there.
you have that awareness, you can't go back for me anyway.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
once
yeah.
I've had
You
that
can't
awareness the
unlearn
first time,
it.
you can't
Yeah.
yeah, it's so you're right, that first time that you have that awareness, it's like there's no turning back, you're gonna have that, and so then it is, like, getting familiar with what that feels like and knowing what it feels like and then doing something different, which is I think the hardest part is the awareness. The doing something different, in my experience, is a lot easier, um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
most of the
Yeah, the
time. It's
awareness
just
is
like
what I would say for me. I didn't even get there until like, yeah, I was like in my mid 30s,
mhm.
which is crazy, right? Like,
No, that's where I am. That's exactly where I am, and I'm
uh,
having all these epiphanies about life and my role in my life.
uh,
Um, so I don't think that's unnatural because up until now it's been very much the Elizabeth show for me, and the rest of the world should adjust.
I mean,
So
that's pretty much how it is for everyone. Right?
yeah,
Every one of us are living in our own show where we're the main character. There's no other way. That's how we see the world. So
yeah,
you know what
yeah, like a full grown toddler.
I mean? All right, that was super interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think a lot of people can
Yeah.
relate to that.
And I think a lot of times when you and Michael first told me that, like, you're like you're judging, or you're these type of like things where you tend to be like more on the negative like pessimistic
Mhm.
side or whatever. I really didn't see that at all, right? Because
Mhm.
knowing you, like, you would never expect that about you, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things, like, I guess what I was gonna say is it's one of those things that you can't really tell just by looking at someone, like whether um whether this person is self-aware, or like this person is really judgmental or not. Because the people that I met that are the most judgmental are actually some of the nicest people I met. So it's kind of like it kind of throws you off because you're like, really, this
Yeah.
person, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you know what? It's all what you do with that information.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, it's all how they use that information and their healthiness internally, I think. Their willingness to do work. Um, and also, I probably the reason I don't know, I think a lot of people that aren't healthy in that regard don't even see it, so then they're not vulnerable enough to share it. They don't even know that that's what
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
are.
That's when they're. That's the. I talk about the three stages of authenticity, where
Mhm.
the first step, you know you're faking it. The second step is where you're like, I don't give a shit what anyone thinks of me, right? That's when you think you're authentic. So
Yeah.
I think it's at that point, right? When you're at that point,
Yeah.
these people are so not self aware that they're not even ashamed of their actions. And then I think you get to
Right.
the last step where you're like, fuck, I am like that. And I'm actually ashamed of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I
And it
hide it.
sucks. Yeah, so
You
I
know what I
hide
mean?
it,
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah,
actually
yeah.
gonna,
And you
like,
wish, like, why
share
am I like this?
yeah. And you're judging the shit out of yourself.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like the third step. I like I mean, I wouldn't say like judging, yeah. judging yourself. I guess maybe there's a fourth step, because I think there is a step where you just even stop judging yourself because you just stop judging others.
Yeah. That's like the pinnacle. It's like the tippy top.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful place,
Yeah.
and yeah, hopefully we can get there.
I know. I'm like, I'm not there yet, but I'm all for trying.
Yeah, like when I think to get there, you almost have to be like, that mom that is telling their kid, like, all right, I'm gonna leave you here, right? When you see that, for you to be like, oh, that's probably not the right good way to do it, but to each their own. Like, she has to live her life,
Yeah.
you know.
You're right. You
That's the
know,
next level.
the person that that is in a lot of ways, I feel like that's Michael Brody way. Like it's not that he doesn't um see, and I mean he has moments, right? But from an overall thematic, how he lives his life, it is in this. That's not how I would do it, but whatever. Like he has that gift
Yeah,
of, or maybe it's just fucking hard work and just acceptance for people, how they are and how they are going to do their own thing, and that's fine, and that's fine with him. It doesn't affect him, the way
because
it
it's out of
does
his
me.
control.
It's out of his control. He's able just to surrender it, keep moving.
Yeah.
He is probably the only person that I know that's at that level, and what
No, a lot
it's
of
also
people,
taking 20.
most successful people I know are like that.
Yeah.
Because, like, I just feel like when you're running a business, your ego is being tested daily. Do you understand
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's almost like you're going to the gym every day, all day. And I think that
Yeah.
what happens is there are two types of people. There, over time, their ego gotten broken down from going to the gym every day like that, and then they've gotten stronger, right? And then the second type of people is the ones where they give up because they're like, "Fuck the world," Because
Yeah.
here's an example, right? One of the way how your ego gets broken down is a lot of times, if with my employees, what I have to do is, even though they did something wrong, and I gave a little nudge, it's like, oh, oh, you did it like that. Oh, that's cool. But what about this other way? What did you think of these other ways or blah blah blah? And then let's say they actually change their mind, they do it this way, right? Because I kind of nudged them a little bit. At the end of the day, that person is not going to realize that the significance of that moment. They just think that they're
Mhm.
smart and that's why they did it, right? So they're going to take all the credit. And as a boss, what you
Yeah.
have to do is you have to give them all the credit, fully knowing
Yeah.
that person doesn't know
That you
shit.
helped. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be like, oh shit, how did you do that? Like I
Yeah.
have to do that, and that's one of the things that was so hard for me, like in the beginning.
Mhm.
But that's what I mean by, after a while, my ego has been broken down so much. They're like, oh, well,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, it's kind of funny, right? Because we don't do that when, when a child comes to us and be like, hey, daddy, look what I did, blah, blah, blah. And we think it's stupid, but we don't go be like, what do you mean that's stupid? We don't do that. We're like, oh, really great, blah. With a child, we know how to play with their ego and we know how to do that. Why can't we do that with another
Yeah.
adult? You know?
Right. Like what shifts? At what age are we like, oh, you're not allowed that grace anymore? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
a
it's
good
because
point.
it's a judgment. It's a judgment of
Yeah.
us living in a society together where we all vote for the system which is going to affect all of us, and we're like, you're so stupid, therefore you're affecting me. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, like, I think we go down, our brain automatically jumps to that conclusion when clearly it's not anywhere near that.
Mm-mm. Man. Yeah. Good talk, son.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope my audio sounds better today.
It does, and because of that, we want everyone to subscribe and make
Yes,
sure you rate
please.
us. If you
Subscribe
could,
on YouTube and also on the
5 stars.
podcast. And
Just
please, yeah,
five
leave
star
you a we have no
review.
reviews.
We have
So
0
sad.
reviews. So, yes, if you made it this far, the least you could do is leave us a review.
Yes, please.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And see you next week. Bye.
Bye.